What's up, guys? Welcome back to BlockHash, exploring the blockchain, episode 306. Today, we have Dan Sutherland, the CEO and founder of Self, on today to talk about the importance of data and privacy in the space and their take on it and how they're going about helping solve the problem. Dan, welcome to the show, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime. Before we jump in and start talking about Self, tell me a bit more about yourself. No pun intended. And a bit about your background as well. You know, what kind of led up to doing this? What did you do prior?
Yeah, so cool. So I've worked in tech for about 25 years. The majority of that time was spent running a managed services and cloud services business called Carenza, which I sold back in 2016. And we ran that for about 15 years. So that was a really, really interesting journey. And we were mostly delivering cloud services for things like central governments and banks and big e-commerce platforms, people like eBay, that sort of thing. So that led to kind of having a pretty good understanding of the importance of security and the workings of security in a technology context, and also an understanding of why it didn't work and why maybe things needed to change. So having exited that, I spent a bit of time doing the thing that I do with my other hat, which is invest in early stage biotechnology companies. And then I gradually moved my way into starting Self, which came when my co-founders had a project he'd been working on, and we looked at some things I'd been thinking about, and we decided that maybe that joining those two things together and building what's become Self would be a good place to be.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that makes sense too, given your background. Was there something about blockchain maybe in particular that made you think that this is maybe the best way of going about, solving and creating some of these solutions?
No, is the short answer to that question. So blockchain was the use of particularly public blockchains, which is where Self is at now, has come about from a lot of iteration on things and looking for the right technology to solve the problems that we were trying to solve. And so we're absolutely not doing crypto, doing blockchain, doing those things for their own sake. We're doing them because they're the right way to solve the problem that we're solving. Although I've invested in cryptos since sort of 2015 or so, that's just personal investment. The reason we got to this from a tech point of view is because it's what works.
Yeah, but the distributed system, behind blockchain, was that something that you found that was suitable for, doing what you guys are doing now with Self?
Distribution was super important for us. So I mean, and I'll go through a bit of what Self does and how it works in a while, but the heart of it is the idea that the centralized world is the core of a lot of the problems that technology presents, not just to people who are technology natives, but to people's grandmothers who are getting defrauded, to governments who can't arrange ID systems to work properly. And you go and look at the Danish government launched a new digital ID system a couple of years ago, which replaced an existing one that was paper-based. That was kind of clunky, but it worked. And they've replaced it with this digital system. And I've rarely ever seen a lower Trustpilot score on something than the Danish government are getting for their digital ID system. It's like a 1 out of thousands and thousands of reviews.
That's
because
horrible.
people are like losing their mortgages and like having their cars repossessed and unable to get a job and can't open a bank account because they don't have access to this thing that doesn't work, that's incredibly easy to steal data out of. So yeah, the distributed nature of this, the ability to decentralize control and the ability to distribute data particularly is super critical.
Absolutely. So what are you guys doing in terms of Self to apply this a bit more to real everyday life and make it kind of a reality? Is this an application that people download? Is this something that people get set up with? Is like some kind of system? How does it kind of work?
Yeah. So the core of Self is a decentralized network. As with all decentralized crypto things, the system will progressively become more decentralized over time. A number of core elements are today, and it will grow. That will grow. So the core of it is a decentralized network. That network is, I guess, analogous to a messaging network. It's a little bit like sending SMS messages across a mobile platform. It's just literally about pieces of data moving from one known place to another known place. And access to that network is gated if you're a consumer by a mobile app. So you download an app. At the moment, we have a beta release that we have out there. We have a Self's native app. So you download that, and on that app, you create an identity for yourself. You curate an identity for yourself. So you start with something, a passport, for example, some information that's coming from somewhere else, and you take the power that is normally used by corporations over our data to correlate data, and you utilize that to correlate a set of information about yourself that becomes the beginning of an identity that you'll use within Self over time. And the objective of that is for it to replace other kinds of identifiers, because we believe that online identity is about an awful lot more than the documents or the accounts that are conferred on us by governments and companies. Our identities, our online identities encompass our voice, the things we write and the things we say, the data about us that's swilling everywhere around the internet, and also those kind of documents and those markers. And the combination of those things kind of begins to define an individual in an electronic world, just as that individual is defined by the friendships they have and the relationships they have and the home they live in and so on in the physical world. So the users use an app to create an identifier to communicate with the network. Organizations have access to developer environments and APIs and SDKs that allow them to build access points for them into the network so that they can communicate with consumers and with each other. And they can do that under an identity. They can also leverage the fact that their employees can use their personal self-identities to identify themselves in the context of the organization. So suddenly you can now use this network and use these identifiers to map electronically the real world relationships that people have. The CEO of the organization can delegate the ability to his management team to do things within the organization, who can delegate responsibility to line managers, who can delegate down to the person who's making the phone calls out to customers. And this is where it starts to hit the real world for consumers, right? So you have a situation then where a customer can get a phone call from, say, their bank across Self's network. So this isn't a phone call in the traditional sense of a cell call or a landline call. It's a call across Self's network, which looks like a WhatsApp call. But that call comes with a payload that says this call is actually coming from your bank, and the person who's making the call is authorized to make that call on behalf of your bank. And unlike today's entirely asynchronous means of doing security on the beginning of one of those calls, the bank says, "Who are you? Give me some security questions," and you tell them some daft things that are probably publicly available anyway. This is synchronous. So as the customer, I can know that it's my bank calling me, and the bank can know that they're talking to the right human in real time. And we're doing all of that because built into that app that you've downloaded onto your phone is the ability to do real-time biometric authentication. So actually to be able to go, at this point in time, this human who is doing this thing is the correct human. It's the human who has access to this account. It's the human who created the Self account in the first place. It's the human who passed KYC 3 years ago, and we've persisted the validity of that KYC since. So you're talking to the right person on both ends. So then you can just have a call about the fact that you missed a mortgage payment, or you like a new car, or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So like, for example, if I were to set it up and get one of these identifiers, Is there any like human error in this process still where, it could be potentially incorrect, or I could get more than one identifier potentially, or submit a false document, or does it go through a very strict like KYC process?
So, so the short answer is it's incredibly hard to do that. And we've
Mhm.
not been able to envisage a way in which it could be done. But I've done tech for long enough that I'm not going to say it's impossible. I'm just going to say we can't
Sure.
see how you could do it. The processes are pretty rigorous. Like, we will only take certain levels of proof today and accept those. So, for example, we're looking for every piece of proof that we can have to be something that can be key signed, so that we've got cryptographic proof that this thing is true. So, for example, I'm based in the UK, which is a really weird use case, because in the UK there is no such thing as identity. Like, legally, there's no such thing as identity. So that's
Mhm.
an interesting starting point. But we use the biometric. So there's a chip on the passport. There's an NFC chip on the passport which contains an image, and that image has been signed by the issuing authority. So we know that a responsible authority has verified that that image is correct, and we then do image processing on the image from the chip. We don't take a photograph of the passport. We're not interested in that, other than to be able to process the code on the bottom of it. We take the image, we compare that image with a bunch of liveness scans that we've done of the user over a period of time, and with other bits of info that might have been inputted. But we're not, self is not being an arbiter of identity. It's allowing a user to curate a set of identity documents about themselves that are proven, that have a set of keys associated with them to prove that they're accurate, and then give them the ability to both correlate that information and share that information with third parties. So it's less about, because this is decentralized, right? There's no self stores no data in the heart of its network. We're not keeping people's passport information. When you put stuff into the app, it just goes in the app. It doesn't go and be stored in the cloud somewhere. As one of the things that's kind of important about the security around this is we don't even trust the cloud-based file systems. This stuff lives in your phone, on your hand, on your phone, and it doesn't go anywhere else. So when you put information in, it's going into your app. The only time it's moved anywhere else is because you've sent it somewhere, and that includes when you send it out to backup. So it gets backed over. So it gets backed up on. It gets backed up by, if you're on an iPhone, it gets backed up to iCloud, but it's kind of double encrypted and sharded and moved around. It's pretty safe when it's in there. We've made sure it's going to be safe, but it's not, and it's your choice to back it up there. So it's under your control as a consumer.
Got it. So you have it like on your phone, in a wallet, you have total control, sovereignty over that identifier and all that
Yes.
information.
Yeah.
Why not use like a cloud service or a distributed cloud service like IPFS, for example, or something similar out there? Is there like a security concern with using it? Is it just not efficient?
Both, really. The safest. So with it structured the way we structure it, we know and can trust the endpoints where data is stored and where it originates from. As soon as we move that outside of the context of that, we no longer have certainty that the bit of data is still the same thing, that is still valid. We lose control of it. And I think one of the things we've been very keen to do is to, with my years of doing IT security previously head on, is to reduce the number of attack vectors that made it possible for somebody to try and do something that might compromise the system, or for people to do something that might compromise the validity of the data. Because with this, it's all about our ability to trust that data is accurate. There's loads of stuff that you can put into IPFS. There's lots of use cases for doing that kind of thing. Today, we're focused on verified data. In the future, we will use those systems for things where the validity of the data is slightly less important. Like, we've got some guys in the US who are working on using self for healthcare. So, currently it's challenging if you go from one hospital to another hospital to transfer your medical records between those two organizations. So what you can't realistically do is build a ginormous great database that contains people's medical records that can be accessed from anywhere, because that's just a nightmare. There are too many dragons there. So if what you do is give the medical records to the consumer, you don't give them control over what the medical records contain, but you give them access to the records and the ability to share them with other organizations. Then they can make them portable, and they can make a small data set portable, rather than trying to give the world access to a giant data set with all its attendant security problems. So that's a really good use case for using something like IPFS, but it's not a core service for Self. That's a service built on top of Self's network. And so I think we started talking about enterprise use of this technology at some point. Self is very much a platform. Like, it's a platform for people to develop stuff on top of. We've got some kids in Portugal who just kind of said, hey, we really want to do an integration between a MetaMask and Self, so that we can use that stuff. And we're like, well, it's open source, go fill your boots, go and build that sounds awesome. So there's lots of different kind of things that people can build on top of this platform. The idea is it's two things. It's a different way of thinking about identity. So almost all the current identity systems, they rely on a fallacy, which is that ownership of something or possession of something is a sufficient proxy for identity. Because I've got some keys, I'm the right person. Because I have access to a particular device, I am the right person. Because I know a password, I am the right person. None of those actually tell you that you're the right person. It's just the person who's got the keys, the phone, or the password. And that isn't security. What we want to be able to do is to go, this is the right human. And ideally, what people are going to use that for is to do that anonymously, because they don't need to know. When I'm buying a pair of sneakers online, I do buy sneakers, even though I don't like to buy sneakers. I don't need to tell them who I am. I just need to choose the sneakers, get money, have sneakers sent to me. And that doesn't necessarily need to involve me sharing any information with the company that's selling sneakers. They just need to give me the sneakers. Whereas today, we're giving away, I go online and go and buy something, the value of the data that I am giving away to that organization as part of the sign-up process is often higher than the money I'm spending on the sneakers. That's nuts. And so yeah, it's kind of
makes sense. Yeah, totally. You get a really good point. Only Dan really knows Dan. Only I really know I. When you really think about it and boil it down, that's kind of what identity comes down to. So owning your keys, and being able to prove that you own your keys, at one point in time, and then throughout, the rest of existence, makes a lot of sense. And I know, like, blockchain distributed systems takes the whole approach of you should control your own keys. There's no centralized party, but as we kind of get closer and closer to having AI as a real reality, do you think maybe there's a use case for having some kind of third party that doesn't have any kind of maybe a agenda or bad type of I don't know what the word is, but intent maybe to use that in some kind of negligent way, or to use it in some kind of bad way or in malpractice? It could be an option in the future to maybe add on to this idea of creating that identity and having something out there that could verify it for you. Because the only thing I ever worry about is us as people, or the human error that comes into it, and the level of I guess naivety.
Yeah, and it's not even just human error, right? It's malicious. It's bad actors deciding to do something because they can take advantage of it. So, I mean, I talked at the top of this about getting to crypto and to distributed systems is the right way of doing things. We did that because actually the core of Self, the network, will be. So we're working towards an IDO later on this year, and once that's happened, the core of Self will be run by a DAO whose purpose will be purely to persist the existence of the network. Like it's not a corporate beast that's designed to make profits. It's designed to exist for the benefit of its members. It's designed to be user owned to the greatest extent possible. As part of the sort of sign up process later on this year, we're going to be giving away a huge number of our tokens. We're giving away something like $10 million worth of our tokens, and we're doing that because we actually want the users to own the network. Like, it's really important that they do, but it's also important that as part of that process, the governance gives control over it to mean that a bad actor can't come and acquire this system. Now, this system needs to exist outside of individual governments' desire to regulate certain things. It needs to exist outside of the opportunity for a commercial organization to buy it and make a mess of it. It's a thing that's kind of slightly like what you're saying. It should exist for humanity and for the benefit of all of us. And if you break it for one of us, you break it for everybody.
Absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense too. On the topic of enterprise grade like applications and businesses being able to use it, are there any existing or potential partnerships for Self to work with certain companies or certain industries in the future? Because I imagine once you have this identifier as an individual, it's probably incredibly beneficial if I could go to Bank of America or my hospital or my provider or or the grocery store or whatever it may be, to prove my identity in different applications in life. Are those like partnerships maybe you guys want to be putting together at some point?
So those are the things that we're working on today. So how you build utility for this. So like, you can look at Self from a number of perspectives. The two kind of primary ones are really how this looks like from an enterprise and how useful it is, and how it looks like from a consumer's perspective. So from a consumer perspective, the idea is that it makes life easier, right? So that you go verify this information about yourself once. You do one KYC check. You don't do another one every time Binance decides they need to change their KYC system. You do one KYC check, and then you can use the validity of that to say, I'm still me. I don't expire because the passport's expired. I'm still me. And then you get to reuse that every time you do things. Like every time you go log into a new organization, well, instead of having to fill in a bunch of forms and sign up for them using that, you just use the data that you've already verified inside Self. When we have a native app that's in production today and a embedded one that's coming shortly, and the embedded one is entirely for organizations, but the embedded one works essentially by saying the data and the characteristics that are about the user, they belong just to the user, and we secure those in a Self vault inside the app that's protected by the secure element. There are then some specific things that relate to your relationship with, you use the example of Bank of America, so they're not a client, but let's make them up for now. So Bank of America's app could be built with embedded Self built into it. That allows you to do the verification of who you are and the stuff that the bank needs to know. But it also means that when you decide you want an account with Chase, when you open that up, that can automatically say, that Dan has an account already with Self, and therefore this information has already been validated. So you can just go log in straight away because you've already got an account in the background of it. So that's kind of how it makes it useful. You're not currently tech is Groundhog Day. We do the same thing again and again and again and again. Self is definitely about the utility of making us not have to do that anymore. Just do stuff once and then repeat it, and make sure that the things that are output from that are integrated with stuff. Today, the beta version of our stuff, we haven't implemented the DID standard yet, purely actually because DID is not yet going far enough with organizational identities and asset identities. But we've done the work in the background, and we'll integrate it with DID later this year. And we're working on a lot of other standards, because over the 3 or 4 years we've been building this, the landscape's changed a lot. So we kind of wanted to make the technology work first and then make it work with standards where that was the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah, let's talk about DIDs for just a second. I've talked about this as well a few times in the past. I think it's a very interesting way about creating these identifiers and making them not just useful to you, but across many different applications. Is that one of the primary things maybe that you guys are looking into, or is it just one of many right now?
It's definitely one of many, but it's super important. I mean, the DID standard allows broader utility, right? And I've already said we want this to be easy to use for people, and the easiest way of doing that is not by saying you have to work out how these 25 different things work, but just have a thing that is a thing. Where we have some challenges with it is the bar to what constitutes an identity and what identifies that user. And currently, we don't think that's set high enough. Currently, we think you need to be able to say, ideally anonymously, this is the correct human. That's like the gold standard for us. This human is the right human. Followed by pseudonymously, this human is sort of roughly this right human that you think is probably called Bob. And then entirely overtly, there are a few use cases where you need to go, actually, this human is Brandon Zemp. Right. And that only has to happen very occasionally. And you definitely don't need to do that when you're hiring a scooter to get down the street to a restaurant you're late to, or when you're buying some sneakers. But maybe you need to do it at the airport. And it's kind of doing those things and recapturing what identity is. We've got one really cool integration we're working on. We've just got a grant from the Ripple Foundation to integrate self into XRPL, so that people who are transacting on Ripple's network can verify that the person that they are sending something to or receiving something from is the person they think it is, and vice versa. Like it's a synchronous check, so that you can be sure that firstly it's the person you think it is, which is kind of super useful if you've got fat fingers and you type wallet addresses incorrectly. But it's also useful in the sense that you can bolt onto that, like KYC, AML checks, sanctions checks, that kind of thing. So particularly Ripple, with its focus on banks and big enterprises, they want to know that they're sending funds to somewhere they should be sending funds to, so that they don't get themselves in trouble in the future. And it also allows people to communicate, because we have this comms platform inside it. It means that two parties who are trying to transact on Ripple's network can use their self messaging system or calling system to communicate with each other about a transaction, or indeed send something to somebody else using the name rather than using a wallet address. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is cool. When did that happen with XRPL? Was that recently, or has that been?
Yeah, so they announced mid-January. They announced their Wave 4 grantees, which we were one of. Yeah, super excited about that. That's going to be really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. One more question before we kind of start wrapping up. I wanted to kind of apply this to a real world use case in the past here, I guess not too long ago, but given 2022 and all the problems we've had in the blockchain space, from Celsius to Voyager to BlockFi to FTX, especially with FTX, do you think that, if self was being applied in some of these situations, especially like the FTX situation, that maybe that could have been either prevented or mitigated, whether it's, being able to prove where certain funds are, make sure that, certain activities weren't happening in the first place, giving a bit more of control and transparency to the customers and their funds. Do you think that there's maybe an application in some of those instances where, self was missing and could have really been beneficial to have?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the most important word you said in that was transparency. One of the things that self can do is provable transparency. So like, we know that this is happening at this point in time. We know we can prove that at this particular point in time, this organization held this many Bitcoin, for the sake of argument, and make it more complicated than an auditor going in and saying, yeah, I've had a look in the wallet, there's that many Bitcoin in there today, but actually they've been borrowed from another exchange who'd previously lent them to a third one, and they're spinning the plates around all over the place. We obviously don't yet know exactly what happened, particularly with FTX, but if what happened was just massive traditional corporate fraud, it's quite hard to do anything about that inside an organization. That's kind of where regulation can be really useful. But there is an expectation, I think, that should be placed on organizations by their customers, that those organizations, if they have been asked to hold on to somebody's assets, should be transparent about the whereabouts of those assets, and it should be possible for the user to check at any time that that's what's happened. Right, that was kind of part of the concept of crypto in the first place, was this is going to be different from traditional banking, where all those bad people in suits have been lending each other money they didn't really have, and now none of us have mortgages anymore. This was meant to be a different world, and it's kind of descended into the same world because money, I suppose. But yeah, you can absolutely do things about transparency. You can do things about knowing who the parties are to things. You can do things about making sure you know about the transfers of funds from one place to another. Like, you can start tying coins to individual identities. That's part of the thing that we're looking at with Ripple, is like knowing that these 20 Bitcoins, which are essentially an electronic asset, they belong to this individual who might be anonymous. They don't have to be overt, but this human owns these coins. Where are these coins? And being able to work those kind of things in, I think, is super important. But it's not something we've had the opportunity to do yet, but I would like to see that happen.
Yeah, totally. I think corruption rears its head in so many different ways, but in multiple different industries, like not just the legacy system and world that, still exists, but even in the new one, in the most innovative technologies and within blockchain, within fintech. I mean, last year was a very good example of that. So it's exciting to have technologies like what you guys are building out with Self, and to have those as a more reliable option in the future. I do think it'll be something that helps, prevent a lot of these contagions. Hopefully it doesn't happen again to that extreme, but it will eventually.
There's still some skeletons in some closets somewhere, I think, that are yet to appear, but we'll see. Hopefully not as overt. And the crypto ones are super painful, but it's interesting that the scale of them still is so much smaller than the big traditional failures. Madoff's Ponzi scheme was so many times bigger than the FTX stuff. Let's hope there isn't more on that scale to come.
Yeah, though he's fighting it pretty vehemently. SBF is. So, I mean, I guess we'll see what the verdict is in the end. I mean, I won't be presumptuous, but I do think there's plenty of fraud there. So, well, I guess we'll find out.
Who knows?
In terms of Self, where can people go if they want to not only learn a bit more about it, but they want to get set up and they want to start using it? They want the application. Should they just go to the website, or where would you direct them?
Go to the website. There's a bunch of documentation if people want to do building stuff. We've got a full sandbox environment, so you can go have a play and build things and see what works for you. We have the apps are in the public app stores. You can download those, use those, report bugs because it's a beta and there'll probably be some, and just play with it. Really, the thing we'd love right now is feedback. We're working behind the scenes on the launch customers, on the first commercial entities who are building things on top of it, which is super exciting. And looking at how we work on encouraging consumers, and a big part of that's going to be a big token giveaway. And that's kind of fun. Essentially, you get points for signing up for Self, and you get points for inviting other people who also sign up. And those points, you continue to accrue points up to 9 degrees of separation away from your original sign up. So there's kind of some fun maths in the back of that. And when we get to IDO, those points get divided up and allocated tokens. So there's real stuff to be handed out off the back of that, which is kind of exciting. And then you've got access to Self and stuff that you can do with it, which is super cool. So currently it's an invitation system with a whitelist, with a wait list on it. So if you had an invite, awesome, sign up. If you don't have an invite, then the waitlist will let you in pretty quickly, because we're keen to get we're keen to get as many people as possible trying it out.
Nice. I imagine you guys have a community somewhere on Telegram or Discord potentially.
We have not much in the way of community on stuff right now. We've got a Telegram presence. We haven't used it much, and Discord we haven't used as yet either. We're really just kind of peeling ourselves out of stealth at the moment. So we'll start to work on that as the next couple of months unfold.
Yeah, build a community, man. People love this kind of stuff. It's a really hot topic right now.
Yeah.
It'll be really good for the longevity of self.
Yeah, totally agree.
What about yourself? Can people find you online if they want to maybe connect, have a conversation with you, talk about some potential partnership or collaboration opportunities? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I am normally at Dan Suth, DANSUTH, on pretty much everything.
Okay.
So use that. You can find me that way.
Perfect. Yeah, Dan, thank you for joining. Really appreciate it. It's been a really, really good episode. And I've learned a lot, not just about you, but also about, different ways to approach identity and protection and transparency and data. And I think in the day and age we're in right now, especially after last year, it's incredibly vital, I think, going forward, for people, but also for corporations and businesses, enterprise, to really consider the importance of it and what that really means, and to learn from some very key lessons. So keep doing what you're doing. Very excited to see what pans out and what partnerships you guys have, and keep me updated.
Cool, will do. Thank you, Brandon. Thanks for your time today. It's been really good.
Will do. Take care. See you next time.
Thanks.